Firstly, what are your thoughts on this outcome and this whole situation?
Well, look, not surprised by the decision of the Federal Court yesterday. The Minister's powers are very wide indeed, a very large amount of discretion, and really not much of an opportunity for Djokovic's lawyers to advance any arguments that were likely to persuade them of any result other than the fact that his continued presence in Australia would be a risk to the health of Australians. And there was concerns, obviously, the Minister was concerned that Djokovic might stir up anti-vax sentiment, and the judges accepted that the Minister could exercise his discretion on that basis.
Do you think that is a genuine concern given the scenes that we saw over the last 11 days?
Look, the important thing to record is this. It was the job of the Federal Court to decide whether the Minister might have reasonable grounds for reaching that conclusion. Whether people would form the view that Djokovic was stirring up anti-vax sentiment is really not the critical point here. It was just whether that this was possibly a reason, as it were. But look, it's interesting. There was a demonstration yesterday in Melbourne amongst anti-vaxxers, and Novak Djokovic is probably one of the most notorious anti-vax people on the face of the planet. Views might legitimately differ about whether he would stir up anti-vax sentiment, but the nature of the discretion that the Minister has is very wide. And so there was really no grounds for the Federal Court to deny the Minister that discretion on this occasion.
Do you think Tennis Australia is at fault here, or should at least be taking some responsibility? There are calls for the boss to stand down. But, as discussed with a previous guest on the show today, who can blame Tennis Australia for trying to get the world #1 player here, who has been coming here for a very long time in this country and is a huge draw card to the event itself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I think that Tennis Australia, the Victorian government, the Commonwealth government, they'll all be looking at this very carefully as a case study of what not to do a second time. I expect that next year, if the pandemic is still going on, which I certainly hope it isn't, there will be a greater degree of coordination between Tennis Australia, the Victorian government and the Commonwealth government to make sure this doesn't happen again. Look, the fact that we were in court about a week ago and the Commonwealth on the one hand and Djokovic's lawyers on the other were arguing about the ATAGI guidelines, whether the medical exemption rules applied and so on and so forth, is an indication that the regulations weren't clear, that there was for debate, and I think that's something that needs to be resolved. And look, we've got 12 months to resolve that, so let's hope it happens.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, how was it allowed to get this far? He took a lot of steps before he landed here in Australia. What is this whole process and now his deportation show about the current system?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really important point to make. Any of us who've been travelling interstate in the last few months will have been applying for border passes. It's a simple process. There's a couple of boxes you tick, you do it online, you get your visa, your border pass pretty quickly. I don't understand why the visa process internationally just doesn't include an additional box saying, are you vaccinated or not? If you're vaccinated, then you're welcome to come. If you're not vaccinated, then perhaps you can be diverted to a different process where immigration officials can spend a bit more time and energy going through that. And let's hope that in the next 12 months, Tennis Australia, the Victorian and the Commonwealth government can all come together and smooth out the visa processes, so we don't have a situation where someone is coming to Australia and then finding out at the border that there's some sort of problem.
And also the handling of the situation. I think that has really upset a lot of not just supporters of Novak Djokovic, but general members of the public. They didn't like how it was handled from the beginning, treating someone who, yes, he has a profile and yes, he's been coming here for a long time, but it was really how he was treated that did not sit well with people.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think most people are surprised that we have a situation where a person gets a visa has a belief that they're entitled to enter Australia, only to find out at the border that that's not the case. And I understand the Minister for Home Affairs was explaining that process this morning. And certainly there are going to be circumstances where a person may arrive in Australia. Perhaps they were asymptomatic before they left the country, but they're symptomatic when they arrive. And there are going to be exceptional cases where Border Force have to make a decision at the border. But in this case, this wasn't one of those cases. Djokovic's status was well known to people for weeks, months before he arrived in Australia. And it really was a shame that it was allowed to get to the place where it got. We should try and avoid doing these things in future, and hopefully there will be that coordination that makes sure it doesn't happen that way in the future.
Well, we have to leave it there. Professor, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it.